Item 10 was, okay, item 10 was pulled, so therefore we have item number 11. Councilmember Pratt.
Thank you, Madam President. The item is extension of airport concession agreement. Recommendation that City Council extend the existing food and beverage lease and concession agreement between the City and Varona Enterprises of Florida, Inc. on a month-by-month basis until a new agreement is approved.
I have a motion, and I have a second. Discussion. Councilmember Wingate.
I still go back and ask the question is whether or not we have the authority to do this. Now, the item was pulled, so my understanding is that the Varonas would stay there on a month-to-month basis. And I guess my question is, do we have the right to make an extension of the contract since we weren't able to be the ones to make the contract in the first place?
City Attorney, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Council President, Councilman Wingate. And again, I would refer council to the Allen, Norton, and Blue opinion of February the 6th, 2014, which states that the ordinance effectively prohibits the use of the airport for any commercial purpose without the mayor's express authorization. Accordingly, it does not appear that the council may extend or otherwise enter into a contract for the airport's food and beverage services unless the mayor provides written authorization. I think there are other bases, but I concur with that opinion, and that should suffice.
Okay. Dr. Pratt.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll speak specifically to that and more generally. As he pointed out, we can't unilaterally enter into an agreement. However, this recommendation is for a resolution which would require the mayor's approval. So this would not be a unilateral action of the council. It would be, as the governing body, we are saying that many years ago a lease was entered into in a competitive manner with Varona's through our competitive bid process. That lease has an extension provision in it, and we are recommending that that extension provision be executed. This item has become very lawyered up, as we all have noticed, and we have, this has been dragging on for a while. It's March 13th. The current lease with Varona's expires the end of this month. We have before us, I was just flipping through at one of our various points today, an opinion from OHM's counsel. That's the firm who had been the recommended bidder previously, and we turned down their proposal through that RFP process. And in it says, it has come to our attention that certain persons have suggested changing the selection process to a process that does not involve competitive bidding. Please be advised that pursuant to the city's procurement policy and Florida law, this contract may not be awarded without competitive bidding. The current lease with Varona's was awarded through competitive bidding. We have no other competitive bid before us to consider at this point, and so we need to make sure that the patrons of the airport have food and beverage options, and as far as I can see, the council policy requires that concessions at the airport be done through a competitive bid process. And in January, we rejected the previous competitive bid process and have been operating as though that process was ended, and we need to start a new one. And until we can really have a properly done process, I believe that it is imperative that that this city take action to extend that lease that was awarded competitively, and we can continue providing service to the flying public. Thank you.
Councilmember Baird.
Thank you, Madam President. I believe the current lease does have a holdover. I think it's a holdover clause, the month-to-month. I have a question for the airport director, if you wouldn't mind, Madam President, since he's down there ready to go.
Yes,
Can you just tell me, it's come to my, I've learned that there's been talk of boarding up Varonas at the end of this month. Is that your plan currently under this, what we have, notwithstanding what we're doing right now, but is that the plan right now, is to board it up on March 31st?
Well, first of all, good evening. It's been a long evening, and Madam President, Mayor Hayward, Councilman Baer, absolutely the airport has contingency planning all the way through. For it to be characterized that there isn't we look at our leadership and want our leadership to give us direction. We're your staff. We're your staff. And based upon decisions that are made, we have different contingencies, multiple contingencies. That is correct.
Okay. And what I understand is that they would then have two months to get all their stuff out. Is that correct?
There is, built in the existing contract, there is 60 days to remove their property and what is considered improvements to the airport itself. And if you can envision any time that you travel, you can see areas that have been drywalled up in a process of change. We have to do that no matter who has the ultimate lease. It's been 18 years, 20 years since major improvements in a lot of the facilities that are in behind the scenes at these operations, both landside and airside. I would like to also, though, our obligation as staff is not to be caught up in politics, but to make sure that our leadership knows the best information, accurate, objective information, so you can make good decisions. Dr. Pratt has referenced several times that the existing contract that we're in right now was on a competitive basis. It was not. In 2003, when it was awarded to Mr. De Varona and Varonas, it was after an RFP was rejected. We had one offer, and it was found that it was financially not responsible, and staff made a recommendation it was not competitively bid. Mr. De Varona was given as part of, and sir, you referenced your board policy on Monday.
Right.
And I couldn't agree with all of the board more that we need to have structure and follow structure. I'm all about structure and policy. Your very own policy, you cite page 2.4, but there's also 2.5 that's on there. And that was a mechanism, when you look chronologically back in 2003, when that was adopted January 23rd of 2003, and the concession that is currently in place right now and expires at the end of the month was entered March 18th of 2003, the mechanism was actually the next page of what you were referencing, and that is a non-competitive direct negotiation.
Right, but that occurred because you didn't have any other competitors at that time, right?
No, that was because the RFP was rejected.
It was rejected by
Staff.
By staff.
Staff recommended to council to reject the RFP and to go direct negotiations with Mr. De Varona. Mr. De Varona did not compete in 2003. It was not a competitive process that Dr. Pratt is referencing. And I just want to make sure that our board has accurate information to make good decisions. This, with all due respect to Dr. Pratt, this item to legislatively put a resolution in place to extend a contract that's already in place is not necessary, and it puts the airport in a very precarious situation. Now, as a board, you're passing what amounts to a law that says this goes on continuously, and we very much have got concern for the 30 employees that Mr. De Varona employs. We very much have got 2 different contingency plans that both companies will employ 100% of these existing employees, and I think, based upon their performance, that they will be able to offer better wages and better amenities. But keep in mind that Mr. De Varona is a vendor at the airport. It's much like an Eastern Airlines, if you will. He's a private company. If we go down the road of passing resolutions to extend contracts, staff really has concern about that.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilmember Myers, you had your light on and it went off.
Well, I was just wondering, in light of this lawsuit by OHM, where does that leave us in terms of, at the end of the month, if Mr. De Varona has to, close his business, where does that leave us in light of this lawsuit?
Well, Madam President, Councilmember Myers, I think the first thing that we need to recognize is the fact that status quo of these areas, we can't just allow it to continue to sit. We have to make forward progress with clearing out the areas for any company to move us forward. Proposals, and since the item was polled tonight, I'm not going to reiterate the advantages of what staff's recommendation is, but I will say that having temporary facilities in place, we will not have passengers that will go without food and beverage options. That is not acceptable. Your airport management would never allow that to happen. And because we have a vendor that is nearing the end of his contract and is pushing the issue of continuing that process, it puts us all in an awkward situation, clearly. But we have 2 contingency plans. I look for my chain of command to be able to present that properly.
Mr. Wingate?
Yeah, I'd like to know what's going to happen on April the 1st at the airport. What are the contingencies? What's going to happen April 1st?
Again, we have 2 contingency plans. I have a company that contractually, to go into the details of that right now is because
Well, I'd like to know.
We will have temporary facilities in place April 1st at the end of this lease.
Who's going to supply those temporary facilities?
That decision, it still needs to be made.
Okay, do we have any involvement in that at all?
Well,
Madam President,
Yes.
and again, I'll just apologize in advance. I'm not trying to be disputatious. I'm not trying to be argumentative.
Neither am I.
And I simply want a clear record so I don't have to answer Councilman Bear's email tomorrow to me. I'm rendering a legal opinion as your city attorney that this council does not have the legal authority to do what you're being requested to do. This matter is in the executive province of the mayor, and it's within his sole and exclusive control. Now, I understand people don't agree with that. I understand we have every lawyer in town and out of town who has their own opinion, but I'm rendering the opinion on the record simply so there's no confusion about what your city attorney's opinion is. You may accept it, reject it, deride it, whatever, but that's my opinion.
All right, thank you. I have one card, Mr. Houston.
Madam President, my name is Gary Houston. I'm a resident of 536 East Ramona Street. First of all, I'd like to thank the mayor. I think that it was a wise thing to withdraw the OHM proposal. But I must say, I am absolutely bewildered by what Mr. Donovan just told you. I look at the council memorandum that Dr. Pratt prepared. Attached to that is a memorandum from Tom Bonfield, who was then the city manager. That memorandum is dated October 7th, 2002. Behind that is a second memorandum prepared by Frank Miller, dated October 7, 2002. Those 2 memos absolutely refute what he told you about a non-competitive bid. I don't know what he's talking about, and I submit he doesn't know what he's talking about. Now, what I would say to you, that the proposal that Dr. Pratt has on the table is the only common sense approach to this absolutely bewildering situation. At this point in time, you need to do what is best for the city of Pensacola and for the traveling public. Forget about what's best for Mr. Varona, what's best for OHM. You need to support your citizens and your tourists because the travel season is about to begin. And Mr. Wingate, it's my personal opinion that when you ask a direct question about who's going to provide services on April 1 and you get a dissembling answer To me, that is completely unsatisfactory.
Thank you. Councilmember Baer?
Thank you, Madam President, and I do tend to agree with some of Mr. Houston's comments. And I can read policies, I will just tell you that if you read page 2.5, it talks about procedure for notification of non-competitive leases. Very clearly on 2.4, it says notification of concession leases. So while you may interpret that one way, I read concession, and I see concession as being competitive, because that's what it says in our policies. So you can have your contingency plans, but you need to read our policies and not tell us that you can do this when it's clear the concessions are competitive.
Councilmember Myers?
Yes, I'm going to support the motion, and I just want to thank Councilwoman Pratt, Dr. Pratt, for your brilliant, creative, and thoughtful presentation. And so I'm going to support it, and I'm not trying to be, what is that word you used? I like it. I like the way it sounds.
Disputatious.
Disputatious.
I'm giving you that.
Okay, and then the other attorney, he used the word dissembling. I like both of those. I like the way they sound. So thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Tahar?
Thank you. It's just, sometimes I get, and maybe I'm misspeaking, but we had a competitive process for this, and then we decided to just reject that, which is our purview. That's fine, but I believe it's up to us to ask the mayor to do a new RFP or provide a temporary thing or something like that, because that's what he's supposed to do. And it's unfortunate that we're in this situation, but we had a process and we followed it because but we rejected it. So I think we need to ask him to make sure there's food April 1st and figure out a long-term solution and then bring it back to us. So that's my opinion.
Dr. Pratt?
Thank you, Madam President. I will concede I scanned through, and Mr. Donovan's probably right. I know this lease was entered into properly. The legislative body did it, and I didn't see an RFP number. So, but I don't know exactly. And see, I don't even pretend to be an attorney up here, so I don't know exactly when we changed all the policies. But I do agree with Councilman Baer that our policies say for concession leases they will be competitive. For anything that's available on a non-competitive basis, this is how we do it. So, I know that when I first got on council, we changed over some of the policies and looked closely at what we were doing at our airport. But ultimately, this is not a unilateral extension. That's what's prohibited by the Allen, Norton, and Blue letter. This is a governing body saying, we have an asset, and we want to make sure there's something at our airport so that people can eat. We, at this point, don't know, and there's half a month left. And this is our way of saying we want to provide for the traveling public. This is not a endless agreement. All this resolution says is this is continued until we approve something instead. And we want to know what it is. I think that we have a right as the governing body to know what is going to be going on at our airport in less than half a month. So that's all that this resolution says. If the mayor in 2 weeks wants to give us something that says, hey, here's something, this is not a lease, but it's a short-term agreement with somebody to provide some Coca-Colas, maybe we'll approve that. But at this point, we have no other alternative before us. This lease was created somehow appropriately, I assume, many years ago. If not, somebody would have sued by now. And we should follow what we have the power as the council to oversee the operations in this city. And this is a resolution that simply says let's continue this. Now, if the mayor wants to listen to the attorney and not sign this because he thinks that he has the ultimate right, I'm going to leave that to the lawyers. But I think that this is the responsible thing for this council to do. It's the only option we have at this point to provide for the community. Thank you.
Councilmember Spencer?
Thank you, Madam President. I am going to follow in the wake of fellow council member Wingate, who just asked the question, just what is going to happen April 1? And the reason I want to ask that is, first of all, I think it's consistent with my previous inquiries as it related to the port lease. I can make better decisions the more informed that I am, and I need more information. And as painful as it may be, I think it's productive, I think it's timely. We've got really only one opportunity to shift from what right now feels like someone's asking me to operate with blind faith and trust, and I've got an opportunity to learn more from our airport director, given the chain of commands permission for him to do so. But I think we've got a chance to get enough information so that we can cast a vote with confidence. Not that I don't have the confidence in the leadership of our mayor, but what I'm hearing is I'm hearing people asking questions, and I think if we can get those questions answered, we can move on and end this prolonged sort of mystery. So I would like to ask, Madam President, our airport director, specifically a question that piqued my interest.
Go ahead.
All right.
Ms. Castillo?
Mr. Donovan.
Thank you. Because all of us as council members have received certain forms of communication from citizens as well as employees at the airport that have expressed their concern about their fate and their job security, you said something that I think I would ask for you to elaborate on if you can. It helps me. You said that many of the Varona Enterprises employees you expected to gain employment. And is that in this solution? That includes temporary vendors?
Yes, sir, it does.
Okay. That's something I definitely wanted to find out. So many of those individuals that have contacted us, when the time is appropriate, you expect them to shift basically under new management, new supervision.
Absolutely. There is a very viable company for temporary services that is in airports around the country that is able to execute a plan that will interview 100% of the employees that are currently employed in food and beverage. And perhaps I didn't answer Councilman Wingate's question properly, that we will ensure that there is food and beverage. The management, your management of your airport will ensure that. The difficulty with this is obviously when there's contractual ramifications, legal challenges, multiple legal challenges that are taking place, and the fact that these employees are not directly employed by the airport. They're not airport or City of Pensacola employees. They're employed by a company. So I cannot say as the airport director that I'm going to employ Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so. I cannot verify to this council that, and that's why I'm not trying to be elusive, but I do not want to be able to overstep my bounds. Through the chain of command, through the mayor's office, we have temporary solutions to provide food and beverage services at the airport itself. And again, these companies both have got the pledge to me in writing that they will interview 100% of the employees that are here currently.
Do you know, Mr. Donovan, if those employees are aware of that?
I do not know if they're directly aware of that. I know there's been some communication to that, but on an individual
If
basis,
they're
I do
watching
not know.
tonight, they now know.
Absolutely. I would reassure them that they're not going to be jobless.
I did email one of the employees who was speaking with the other employees.
And is it possible, perhaps the mayor can share with us, even if it's just a conceptual, a visual, I mean, what is the passenger experience, Mayor Hayward, on April 1? I mean,
Madam President?
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Well, good evening, everybody. I want to address a few things, Madam President and Council, and I want to let you know I respect all of your thoughts and opinions, and I understand the position that Mr. Houston's in. We appreciate him serving as our chamber president and representing Mr. Dave Varona, and I appreciate, I think Eloise was here, I see Eloise, and Robert, and the employees. We went above and beyond as a city government to make sure the process was done correctly. We know what the vote was. We know how the vote came down. But our airport director, Greg Donovan, has always had a contingency plan in place. I think many of us travel the world, travel many airports, and there's always temporary vendors going up and serving the traveling public. There's no secret that my lovely wife, she travels almost every week at that airport. There's plenty of people in the audience. We talk to the passengers. We have a contingency plan in place. I think Mr. Messer has made it quite clear that council doesn't have the authority to extend the contract. If I remember correctly, council voted 6-3 not to extend Mr. Dave Varona's contract. He's a smart businessman. Mr. Houston's a very bright lawyer. We got lawyers, as Councilwoman Pratt said quite eloquently, have lawyered up all over town. And the most important thing is for our passengers, the traveling public that visits our great city, and the ones that live here that travel every single week. So we do have a plan in place, and we're going to act on that. And I don't think anyone up here needs to be worried about that. I have all the faith in Mr. Donovan, myself, and the folks that work out at our airport to make it as seamless as possible. And I know Mr. Dave Varona is a very smart businessman. I'm sure that he probably sent a letter, an email, or a phone call to his employees when he was going up for this RFP, letting them know that there's a possibility, like any business person say, I might not win that contract again. I might not have that contract, so you need to be prepared. But thankfully, the temporary vendors in OHM wants to talk to these employees that have worked for Mr. Dave Varona. And Mr. Dave Varona is going to continue to be a member of Pensacola International Airport. He's a minority owner in the media concessions. So I think that we have a plan in place, and it's time to move forward. So thank you, and I greatly appreciate everyone's patience.
I have a question, and that question is, are the temporary vendors associated with any of the individuals, Creative or OHM? Or they have any relationship with each other business-wise?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Baird?
Just have a question. Thank you, Madam President. So if we go down this route, that we use the temporary, the contingency plan, will that come to council for approval of a lease?
No, it won't.
And under what authority is the director able to do, or the mayor able to do that without approval from council?
Madam President?
Yes.
At the risk of keeping us here all night, there are several bases, Madam President and Councilman Baer, for his authority. The first ordinance is 10-2-4, which talks about airport authority. And it states the city, through its mayor, shall at all times have authority to take such action as may be necessary in the handling, policing, and management of the public in attendance at the airport. It further goes on to say, in any contingencies not specifically covered by these rules and regulations, the mayor may be authorized to make additional rules and regulations and render such decisions as seems proper. That dovetails with 10-2-6, which are the general rules and regulations, which state, among other things, that no person shall use the airport for the carrying on of activities of a commercial nature upon the airport premises, or for the sale of fuel, refreshments, or commodities unless specifically authorized in writing by the mayor. You also have the charter provisions, A1 and A3, that allow the mayor to exercise his executive authority and also authorize him to bring to this council measures for the improvement of his municipal government. Now, the whole issue of RFPs and competitive bidding, and I'm sure I stand to be corrected somewhere along the line, there's no state law that requires notification to council or an RFP in this situation. There's no city ordinance that requires an RFP or notification to council in this situation. So, in my legal opinion, the mayor has the full and exclusive authority in this particular matter at the airport.
Follow up, Madam President. So what you're saying is that the mayor has authority to contract without council approval for leases?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but you don't have any specific details to prove that. We have a policy that I think interferes with that or is more specific, and I think one of the things you said that if it's not in the rules and procedures, then he would have that authority. So I don't see a specific authority that says he can do that, but it was my impression that leases would have to come to the governing body, which we are, for approval.
Well, again, Madam President, Councilman Bear, it's not my duty to argue the position on behalf of the mayor. I just want to make sure we have a clear record. I'm speaking specifically about this particular contract for concessions at this particular enterprise fund. At this point, I'm not addressing anything other than that, and those ordinances and those charter provisions are what I'm basing my opinion on. Now, at the risk of opening Pandora's box, and I don't think we have to get into that in this particular case, but if you're asking me my opinion on the particular council policy that we've been talking about, then my opinion is that that's not binding on the mayor. It's not binding on the mayor because at the time the charter was enacted, there were literally hundreds of ordinances that were conformed to dovetail with the terms and conditions of the charter. Council policies were not. Council policies are not an ordinance. An ordinance is a legally enforceable law. Council policy is a resolution. A resolution, according to state statute, is nothing more than an expression of intent by this council that's not legally enforceable. So again, according to 166.041 of Florida statutes, a resolution means an expression of a governing body concerning matters of administration, an expression of a temporary character, or a provision for the disposition of a particular item of the administrative business of the governing body. And case law tells us that that's not enforceable against anybody. So I don't know what happened during the transition period, but there were plenty of ordinances that were conformed to the charter to restrict the mayor's power. For whatever reason, council policies were not conformed that way. They're resolutions. They don't bind anyone but council.
Thank you, Mr. Wingate.
Well, I just have two questions. In the long term, will there be?
And I know that you want to go off into that particular, but right now, Mr. Wingate, I would please just, I know that may think helpful, but whether or not we, of course, you have to have something later on, but right now, the extension and not into the conversation of whether or not we're going to have another
Well, I
RFP.
would like to get an answer. If you follow his logic that he just explained to us, the mayor really didn't have to come to us and ask us to approve it in the first place if he's got the power, to do what he wants to do. I'll turn my light off.
I have two cards that turn in, once the council starts debating the issue, and we've given the individuals an opportunity to speak, and I did call on one person, we do not go back to the audience for those cards. If you want to wait for open forum, you can, but we don't take cards after we do the discussion. You were given an opportunity to do so. I called on everyone who had turned in a card. Dr. Pratt?
Thank you, Madam President. This is my third time, but while I technically didn't hit my button, it was my agenda item, so I hope that I'm allowed to pretend like it was my motion. I just wanted to clarify one point that was made and make one final point. It was mentioned that the council did not vote to extend the contract for, and I apologize, I don't remember whether it was 6 months or a year back in January. And at that point, I did vote against that because I didn't have the contract in front of me. I wasn't sure what the proper legal procedure was, and I thought, let's get through this and get some clarification. And that was the reason for at least my vote not in favor of it at that point. But in this case, I have spoken to lawyers who felt that something like this makes perfect sense in the municipal setting. And the mayor mentioned having faith in Mr. Donovan. The mayor even has faith in himself. But we are responsible to the voters. We're answerable to the voters. And I don't know what I'll say tomorrow if someone says to me, so what's happening at the airport? And when I am supposed to be the one with connections to this city who should know what's going on and I can't answer it, I can't in good faith leave this with nothing. And so that was why I put this item on the agenda. We asked 2 weeks ago, I had emailed the city administrator. She said, can't tell you anything right now. I think Councilman Bear asked her directly, we can't say anything. We can't say anything. Well, we can do something. Even if we can't say anything, the council can take action tonight to at least say, we think this would provide for the traveling public, and it's the right thing to do. Because we don't have any other option before us at this point. And so I think that we need to make sure we do what we can, and this is the only thing that is an option at this point. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Myers?
Yes, and I do agree with Councilwoman Pratt. However, we do have this lawsuit that's asking for a temporary injunctive relief. The relief they're asking for is the award of the contract, or it says entitled to a temporary injunction enjoining the city from awarding the contract to Creative or extending the current contract with Varona. A temporary restraining order or petition for a temporary injunction can be heard fairly quickly. So I suspect that part of the contingency plan is, I won't be surprised at who is involved in this contingency plan. That's all I'm going to say about that.
All right, we need to, no cards, I need for you to vote. Thank you. Please vote. Okay, the motion passed 5-3. Madam Clerk?
Resolution 07-14, a resolution continuing the food and beverage lease and concession agreement between the City and Varona Enterprises of Florida, Inc., as provided in the agreement until such time as the City Council approves an alternative agreement, providing for an effective date.
I have a motion and a second. Please vote. Okay, motion passes 5-3.